Well, I guess it's that time. Glad everyone's here. Did you have a good day? It's a lot, isn't it? I hope you learned some things, had some fun. We played around with what to do for this close because there's so much to talk about. And so grabbed an assortment of troublemakers. Because we all have opinions. Nobody has a lot of expertise in this space. We're all learning. But certainly we've had some involvement. And what we're going to be doing is changing so quickly right now. So it's fun I honestly feel like it's the conversation we've been having at breakfast all the past few days anyway. Because we are all trying to figure it out, like you are too. So my name's Richard Campbell. You may have seen me at the beginning of the day. I got to start, now I get to finish. And I have an esteemed set of panelists that I'll let them introduce themselves. We'll start with Annie.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Annie Tavasto. I am a CNCF ambassador as well as an Azure MVP and CMO at Vision, which is a DevOps company. Around AI and MLOps, I work a lot with the MLOps side of things, so the operations and how to get machine learning into production, and obviously using AI tooling and working with that in general as well.
Yep.
Okay, my name is Florin. I'm assistant lecturer at the Faculty of Computer Science, and I'm also technical manager in Centric IT Solution Romania. In the last period, I used to play with GitHub Copilot, and probably I can share with you. Now it's better.
Way better.
I finished.
Hi everybody, Brandon Minnick here. I currently work as a .NET developer advocate at AWS. When was asked to join the panel, kind of like Richard mentioned a second ago, I told him I'm not an AI expert, but I've got opinions. So kind of looking forward to the conversation today because there's so many directions AI is going and it's moving really fast. So where's it going? How do we keep up? Who's winning? What does winning even mean? I kind of have all the same questions myself.
And I'm definitely thinking in terms of how this set of technologies are going to benefit developers, specifically. And I think we've already had the first couple of rounds. I mean, I'll happily say Code Whisperer, because that's an AWS product for developers, as well as GitHub Copilot. And they're already evolving rapidly. But it's interesting to think about how much more these large language models could be doing for developers.
Yeah, I agree. And I've already started using a lot of the large language models, so ChatGPT, insert whatever your favorite is here, for what I'll call those mundane tasks that we don't want to do, but we have to do, like writing unit tests. I've literally found you can go to ChatGPT, and it's a little annoying. You have to copy-paste the code you wanted to write the unit tests for, and obviously specify if you want like N unit or X unit. But yeah, I say, here's a class, write a complete unit test suite for this in X unit, and it'll just start pumping out code. And the code's not perfect by any means, but it's perfect enough to copy and paste it over back into Visual Studio, and then edit it a little bit, but then you've got your unit test coverage. Mm-hmm. And who likes sitting down writing unit tests? Like, I don't. I spent a whole day doing it the other day. It was miserable. So hire Florin for all your unit test requests. But yeah, there's definitely still that gap, right? You have to still know the technology, still know the programming language. It's getting closer, it's getting good enough, but abstract concepts certainly, like asking it to...
I like that you said complete coverage. Like, how do you even define that, right? And it's one of the things I like about LLMs as they are right now is they rarely ask questions back. They just try. They try and do something. And I resist anthropomorphizing software as much as possible. Which I never used to worry about. I was perfectly fine cursing Visual Studio until everyone started giving it agency because now it spoke in sentences. Then it's like, okay, now let's remind ourselves it's just software, and that how well it covers. This is sounds like your bailiwick, though, Florian. Like, obviously, you apparently like writing unit tests, which is interesting. But do you use the tools to generate them?
Yes, I did. I run a proof of concept within Centric in the last months of 2023 with some different teams. And I was trying to measure two things. Satisfaction of using this kind of tool and, of course, productivity. I did some research. Microsoft said that if you are using GitHub Copilot, you'll be able to improve the productivity with 50% plus.
That seems optimistic.
Yeah, it's marketing here for sure. But after running this proof of concept, I was able to see a couple of things. For instance, the productivity for the junior developers was increased with around 50%.
So 50.
15, sorry.
15, 1-5, okay.
Yeah, 1-5. If we are talking about intermediate developers, the productivity was increased with around 20%.
That's nice.
For seniors, we had like 25 to 27. I also used that. And
What's the productivity measure you're using there? Is that more check-ins, more code delivered?
Based on the estimation, when you are starting a task and you can close the task after finishing, I was able to see exactly how much time they spent.
So the reduced time.
They did the estimations having in mind that they will not use GitHub Copilot. Then they start use it to use it. But I also I was part in this POC, and I was able to write, for instance, unit tests. My productivity increased with 80%.
Has that got more to do with you? I'm sorry.
I will not answer.
I'm just being mean. I mean, certainly I've been talking to some teams that have been using it for more than a year now, and we're coming in around 30%. But the metrics they were after was more check-ins, that they are getting through pieces of code and getting in it more often, less remediation, that most of that code stood up better. They spent less time going back through it. Certainly they seemed happier. But this was making PMs happy, which is weird. PMs aren't supposed to be happy. Devs are supposed to be happy. But the other thing was far better pull request descriptions. And this was a piece that this my buddy Kent came out. He says, "Listen, I have a chance of understanding what the heck Brandon wrote, because the PRs are being generated based on all the code changes, and so there's a lot more detail than he would write. Fixed stuff, followed by the 2 minutes later, more, and then damn it."
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because I think big, powerful aspect of this is using these large language models to summarize and generalize things for us. And, how much do you trust it? And I'm still kind of 50-50 on it, but certainly, you can give it an academic paper or, like you said, with a pull request and say, summarize this for me, and spits out just a 1 or 2 paragraph abstract instead of having to read through maybe 10, 20 pages of something.
Heck, what does this code do? What does this regex expression do? Ooh. It's remarkably good at this. And I don't know that you spend a whole lot of time in studio, Annie, but I know you work on a lot of... Do you live in studio?
Occasionally, yeah.
Yeah? But I know you spend a lot of pipeline time, and I'm wondering about better tooling for building pipelines.
Well, there is for Kubernetes specifically, there is a new tool called K8s GPTs that's built on
for Kubernetes.
Yes, exactly. And it's an open source tooling within the CNCF Foundation already. So that's being on the early stages of being, well, it's not tested out, it's available, everyone can try it, but it is quite new. So my warning is that it's probably still.
But what isn't? Yeah. The only old tool in this space right now is GitHub Copilot. As old as over a year. And even then, it's what are we on, 4th version in that time, with Copilot X, and they've been doing lots of iterations. But I'm delighted to see that, because often we don't build pipelines often enough. So anytime that we can inject some knowledge about the process in a language tool. So the few times you're there, you can say, how do I make it X? That kind of thing, and have it, nothing else, just read the docs back to you.
Oh, most certainly. And I think actually from this perspective, I really like this tooling because there's this discussion within the cloud native communities right now that there's probably an influx of AI and ML experts coming in and data scientists to use Kubernetes because you need the Kubernetes scale for quite a lot of AI and ML application production cases, which I actually will find to be a very lovely scenario of, this AI and ML talent coming in and then making the tools to use Kubernetes, which is famously, obviously, incredibly easy to use. Not really a bit of a hard case to crack.
Another tool you never use enough to actually keep in your head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why actually I really like the scenario of a lot of people coming in to use the tool and then making the tool better via obviously the open source contributions and everything. So I really, really like this future that I hope will happen. That it's gonna.
You bring up a great aspect of all of this, which is, what are the prompts that people write, and how well did we respond to them the first time around? Like, talk about having the number of times you've built software, and until you went and stood over someone's shoulder and watched them use it, and went, "Wow, that's not what I intended at all." But the prompt model means the user describes their intent. And then you can argue, like, what did the software do at that point, and was it what they were hoping for? And recognize that, well, if this is the prompt they're going to write, we should just be good at responding to that. Like, I think this thing, it creates us a better path for writing software that people can use. And it may be a little off the path of where we wanted to go with the panel, but I really start digging into this idea of when the software understands language extremely well, so that buttons and knobs are just not that important anymore. Just tell me what you want, and the screenscape is going to be used up showing it to you. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty deep transformation of software. I could use a few fewer buttons and menu items in Visual Studio, please.
Yeah, text to everything, you know.
It's like I'm sitting inside of the cockpit of a 747. I just don't know what any of the buttons do. And the one that I do want to find, I can't find.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I forget which podcast I was listening to, but they were talking about how their bet is that Meta's winning in this large language model, we'll say, adoption race, because not necessarily that Llama 2, Llama 3, I don't know what they're on anymore, is the best, but then Llama's the one that Meta has created. But they already have 3 billion users. And what they've started doing, I haven't seen it yet. I just heard about it yesterday or this morning. Is basically add a search bar at the top of the Facebook app, the WhatsApp app, kind of the same way that Bing Chat is trying to do that, and ChatGPT is trying to do that. But those products have the friction of, okay, well, now you have to download the ChatGPT app, or you have to go to Bing instead of Google, and who does that, right? And so with Meta, the advantage they have is they already have this huge existing user base, plus all this user data that they can train on. And like your mom uses WhatsApp, your mom uses Facebook, and it's just going to be there. They don't have to learn a new program, learn a new skill, download anything new. It'll just one day they'll try it, and if it works, then you've got a new user.
When you bring up a great point, it's like it should just disappear into the woodwork. It's just that the software is more capable now. The fact that it happens to be a large language model or anything like that, I don't think your mom knows, and doesn't need to know, and doesn't care.
Right.
More saliently, they were able to type into a box that something they wanted, and they got it.
Yeah, and I was sitting in Martin's talk on observability earlier today, and he talked about how, on OpenTelemetry, and how OpenTelemetry has crossed the chasm. And he was saying, sorry, it's a boring topic now. It's not the new sexy topic. And I remember back when I was in school learning about this concept of crossing the chasm, where you get past early adopters like tech geeks like us that are going to download and try things and play around with them, and get it to that next level user. And the rule of thumb was, once your mom starts using it, it's crossed the chasm.
That's good, yeah.
And so we might be seeing these large language models and this kind of new internet functionality.
Yeah, I mean, in that argument, though, they don't even know they're using it. It's just a text box. There was a text box before. It's just the fact that it's hooked to a different thing is kind of secondary. But if it's good enough.
It's a different Google search, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and it's an interesting point about it, like especially from one of the things that data that I was talking to PMs about was they spent a lot less time on Stack Overflow, right? The time that they used to spend searching for the right thing, going to learn and other resources, now they're using the chat bot for it and getting sufficient results.
Yeah, and I think where we're going is we're kind of heading into this world where it is this kind of new internet where you don't have to go search for something, you don't have to go to a specific website. I think the websites and the things will still be there, but the way we access them won't be launching a browser, going to Stack Overflow, finding the answer, digging through the comments. It'll be just using this text box. And if you take that a step further, say, kids these days didn't grow up with computers like I did. Didn't grow up with computers that I was using DOS and everything was in the command line, and that's how I got into computing. And I understand that at a real low level. Whereas nowadays, iPads, iPhones are so easy to use that most people have no idea how any of this works. It's all just magic. And the way we access our information nowadays is, again, like you open up your browser or you open up a specific app and you dig through, look for what you're looking for. I can totally see a world where instead of searching, instead of bookmarking websites, instead of sharing links, it's just you got your text box. And we could have a whole next generation that has no idea about the internet we know and use today, because to them, the internet is, I just ask the WhatsApp bot.
And it does what I want it to do. I mean, I don't know if you've been out on the internet lately. It's kind of gross. So, in some ways, we talk about the sanitized bubbles we've already been living in with search optimization and preferences. This is another level of that. Yeah. Where, even removing the sources and just telling you what you want to hear.
I was just about to say, I think in general, the fact that if we would live in a text box in the internet, I think that's not technically too bad, but I think the sources is the very interesting part from a consumer
now
perspective.
the data scientist showed up. I knew you were here. Yeah, sourcing's important, right?
Exactly.
Although, again, I think when you want it anyway, I don't know that we're going to convince people that they should take their sources seriously. Goodness knows that's been a battle in academia for as long as there's been academia. But you should be able to check. You should know where your data came from. I don't know how you fall on the discoverable AI perspective. Like this, my problem with these machine learning models is they are opaque. And often they're solving problems that were solved by more discoverable means. Like we talked about it my talk this morning. It's like we're in a bubble. It's very distorted right now. And everybody's wanting to use these neural models, even for things that really don't need them.
Yeah, and I think honestly for ethics and privacy and these kind of questions with AI, I think we are very much in the hype cycle, which usually quite often can make people blind. And don't get me wrong, I'm very excited for these technologies as well, and I'm all for trying them and everything. But the prediction right now is, across the board usually, from people in the know, is that something will go eventually quite a bit wrong. Like it could be a data leak, it could be some, bias issues, transparency issues, something. But if we don't kind of consider and actively have discussions where we think about the ethical considerations of some of the applications that we're building, we will definitely go wrong. And even if we have the discussions preemptively and try to inbuild a lot of these safeguards, we will still likely go a bit wrong sometimes. But I think the best we can do is hope to minimize the damage to, for example, really important, like, for example, let's hope that it is not on super crucial healthcare data where the issues would come from and so forth.
I mean, part of that's going to be moderating expectation. Just like, listen, it's not always right. We certainly already had the stories of ChatGPT early on, where you had the lawyer that asked for cited case law for a particular case shooting, and then didn't check any of it, just submitted it to the judge, and it was all fabrication. And it turns out, they call it co-pilot for a reason. You're the pilot, so it's still your fault. It's not like the software was going to lose its law license.
But no, I totally agree with Annie. And not to be super pessimistic, but I think we're already too late. I think the technology's already out there. It's so easily accessible, and you can't put that back in the box. We've already opened Pandora's box, and one of the concerns I have, certainly here in Europe, the laws around data privacy are much better. But in the U.S., we still don't have anything like that. And the internet's been around.
California does, sort of.
We got your back. But right. So think about how long the internet's been around, and think about how long companies have been, for all intents and purposes, stealing our data just to resell it.
But to be clear, you gave it to them when you checked that box. It was
sure.
That, but the whole mechanism was, hey, we're not going to make you pay for this because actually you're the product.
Right. And I mean, the world I would love to live in is where we own our own data, and you do have to buy it from me. So yes, Facebook, you can have my data, and there should be a market rate, and maybe it's $20 or maybe it's $40 a month.
Yeah, I would even argue that you can. I like the idea of I can send my data to an e-commerce site, but you get to use it up until the point you deliver the product, and then you don't get to use it anymore.
Yeah.
So certainly we should have control over it.
So yeah, when I look at the way the world is just around what we have in terms of the internet and big data today, and then the laws that are supposed to keep that in bounds, it's still pretty lawless. And now that AI and large language models are here, my worry is we're already too late. And if it took 20 years for GDPR after the internet came about, how long are we going to wait until we put bounds around AI?
And it's actually, I think it's super interesting, exactly as you said, the US is having its bit of an own thing with the regulation regarding everything, to be honest. But Europe has been actually incredibly proactive with the regulation. So even within ML and AI spheres, it's recognized that it used to be that the tech is driving the regulation, but actually now regulation is a tiny bit driving the tech, because Europe has been so proactive with the AI. Probably because of all the connotations that you've talked about within the keynote, for example, that AI is such a polarizing term. And I think that is why a lot of the regulators have taken such an active role on driving the discussion, at least so far. Let's see how it goes in the future, of course.
So the distortion of science fiction is working in our favor now to motivate politicians to act.
At least in Europe, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's good news. And we talk about, in engineering, they talk about the iron ring event, which is the idea that the bridge collapsed because it was built incorrectly, and they made rings from it to say never again, that we build up engineering standards based around the failures. I always thought Y2K was going to be the software failure because I'm old enough to have fought that battle, and unfortunately we were too successful. Like, I think if we'd actually had a meaningful impact on society at the time, maybe we would have been more regulated.
People still think it's a joke.
Well, because we did too good. It bought me a house. If that's a joke, it's a good joke.
Right. Well, I literally just a couple weeks ago was having a conversation, and somebody was like, yeah, but they said the same thing about Y2K. And I was like, hang on.
Yeah.
You know why that wasn't a problem? Because of us.
Yeah.
Like, we fixed it. Yeah. You're welcome. But yeah, you're right.
The Americans put this rule in place in July, that by the end of July of '99, you had to run a Y2K test or you weren't a bank anymore. That was the rule, which meant the first half of '99, I mean a lot of money. We were fixing as fast as we could. You had to pass that test or you were decertified. And it worked. Like it was regulatory. Like, depending on where you are in the world, and America is particularly bad at this, we think that all government has to be incompetent. And different parts of the world see this in different ways. But it can work for us if we insist on it, for starters, and because we do need a playing field. If they weren't allowed to resell our data without our knowledge, if that was against the rules, then there would need to be different business models. But right now, because that data is so valuable and there aren't rules, they tend to defer to that model. They'd rather do that. They know how to sell that information. And I think it's only I appreciate your statement there. It's like, it's only going to get worse with this. These tools now are amplifiers of that problem. And I also think there's really great products we could be building if we had confidence about how the data was going to be used. I've always wondered, we've got cameras in the screens. Like, couldn't we have a machine model that's measuring your frustration level? They just add it to the interface. And I mean, most people react negatively to that because it's like, what would you do with that data? It's like, what if it didn't go further than that? That while you're running the app, it's just assessing your mood and tuning the app accordingly. You know, trying to get out of your way, trying to give you better assistance when it seems like you need it. Like, you start to have really reactive software.
I think hasn't there been reports that at least certain social medias are doing that from the way that we're browsing their applications and serving us content in kind of matching to our moods to trying to keep us hooked in there.
Well, certainly shaping to get more dwell time.
They want to make you angry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Scroll. Well,
that as well.
Yeah, I don't think they actually said if we make them angry. It's like, what keeps them here the longest? Oh, it happens to be anger. Okay. But I think we could also use that in a constructive way too, to make software that's more responsive to people. Like, is this working for you? Rather than having to make a complaint.
I think that's actually a really, really cool usage scenario, like from a engineering and PM perspective. If you could know every point in your product that frustrates the people most, because then you could actually preemptively start solving those issues with educational content or even making the product better in those spots. That would be lovely.
But you can also imagine that software could tune itself to the individual user too. What are the features you use the most? Let me emphasize those. Let me fade the other ones out. You always struggle through these steps, so let me put up the checklist for you. You know, that each person's experience of the software would be tailored to them by watching how they use it. Like, I want to write that app. Like, I think that would be a fun exercise to make software responsive to how people use it. And, you know, that's a deeper way of thinking about these tools, right? Putting machine models to work. Like, do it on us first as developers. Because I'm frustrated a lot, you know. Certainly trying to find the right menu item in Studio, where was that feature? I closed a window. How do I put it back? You know, you deal with it all the time. And so the fact that the tool could be better at that, like just to react, you think about that camera. I accidentally click on that toolbar and that thing closes. And just the look on my face, the software's like, how about I put that back? It looked like that's not what you wanted to do, so I'm just going to put it back, just like that. It's like, okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, and I also think, you know, keeping on the positive trend of AI, and obviously I'm a developer, so I don't know much about biology and medicine and science, but the advancements that are coming out of this are insane. You know, coupled with the pandemic, and we accelerated research into RNA, and then combining that with using these machine learning models to essentially just crank out vaccines. Like, I was just reading an article that said scientists have figured out a generic flu vaccine. So it doesn't have to target a strain anymore. So we don't have to guess. And we could essentially eradicate the flu. And, you know, even the COVID vaccine.
I included the DeepMind piece in my keynote this morning about protein folding. I left off halicine. Halicine is a new antibiotic named after Hal from 2001: A Space Odyssey. but it literally was a data analytics test of existing shelved medicines that would fit the profile as a potential antibiotic. And it was they found out of several thousand medicines that had been tested and shelved, it was a failed diabetes medicine that fit the profile. They started testing it. Not only is it a phenomenal antibiotic, it uses completely different mechanisms than any other antibiotic.
Does this get past the problem we have with antibiotic resistance?
Yes.
That's incredible.
Because it doesn't use a pattern of destruction of the bacteria that the bacteria can get resistant to.
That saves the world.
It helps. There's many
incredible.
other ways to wreck the world. We're trying them all right now. But I appreciate what you, again, there are so many positive things going on. They're just not that exciting where the frightening stuff is. And so we tend to steer towards that. And science fiction goes for the frightening stuff. So it's what everybody's thinking of anyway. Hal tried to kill everybody, not give them better antibiotics.
Yeah, well, and I just saw the new Boston Dynamics robot that looks like something straight out of the Terminator. And it's only a matter of time, and probably already has happened, where the U.S. government's putting a rifle in its hands. So.
Yeah, it's more of a grenade, actually, but yeah. The UN has pretty strict rules around that. I think the U.S. is probably going to follow them, but there are already hunter-killer drones out there with facial recognition.
Okay, I have to say that we're getting a bit doom and gloom, which is totally fine, of course. But
Bring us back, Annie. We're in a dark place.
I really love, just like on the same vein, I really love seeing that there's particularly younger generations nowadays are actually having a bit of a, I forget the name of the movement, but it's like positive cyberpunk. So instead of thinking about the world as this kind of, Matrix scenario, which is, by the way, Matrix is a really amazing movie, but like not thinking about those and Terminator scenarios, but thinking about more like, let's say, Star Trek scenarios and focusing on those in art and in, films and whatnot, and actually bringing those positive scenarios to light, because usually what you focus on will also read to, what you're thinking, your emotions and whatever. So if we focus a bit more on thinking about the positive use cases for these technologies, for example, those really great medicine, we can actually also maybe focus the resources there and so forth. So it's not all doom and gloom, even though we are focusing on the
It's
negatives.
almost no doom and gloom, actually, except in science fiction, right? That's sort of the truth, right? It's like all that we've had 50 years of writing about it being doom and gloom. And then we went and named a technology for it. Like, that seemed like a dumb idea. We should have called this something else. Except that there were marketing people who thought we can trade on this name and make and get money for it. It's not any more artificial than anything else, and it's certainly not intelligent. It's a stupid name. And if we hadn't used it, I think we'd be in a better place. Like, now all of us have to fight that name. You're going to have situations where you're going to want to build software utilizing some of these technologies, and you're going to have people go, oh, it's got AI on it? I don't want it. I remember my mother didn't want Vista installed on her computer. Like, I don't think you're qualified for an opinion, but okay. So I think part of our job is going to end up having to rehabilitate the term because we chose to use it. There you go. There, I'll stop your conversation.
I just remember the name, Solar Punk. Look it up. It's actually quite
Solar
nice.
Punk. Okay.
Exactly. So it's solar energy, using these kind of resources and bringing these images into the sci-fi system, for example, that we would not be so focused on.
Well, and Roddenberry believed strongly in a post-scarcity society. That's really what Star Trek is about. And one would argue that these technologies could democratize knowledge, that we could put effort into making sure that those data models are sound and they're based on facts, because those are still things, and that everyone would have access to a huge amount of knowledge. In theory, we've already done it with the phone, except for the quality issue, right? You can certainly find stuff that'll reinforce anything you want, but what if that text box really focused on stuff that was accurate and true?
So kind of in that same vein, and I don't know the answer to this, so question to the panel. Are we in the post-AI world, where now AI is can write books, publish information online. I have a concern that we're going to have more and more junk out there on the internet. But if we're using that same internet to train the models, then it's garbage in, garbage out. And
Well,
how do we
and
avoid
also it's
that?
degenerative garbage. So they talk about degenerative AI, that when we train models against generated data, you actually get worse and worse models. So there's a strong encouragement against that, which is, it kind of makes sense. It's a photocopy of a photocopy.
Yeah.
They won't also argue that LLMs in general, by definition, are derivative, that they are based on existing data sets. There's no indication in these models whatsoever that you're going to actually synthesize an original idea. You're going to present ideas maybe people haven't seen, but it doesn't mean that they didn't exist, right? It's just coordinated information. It just makes original creativity all the more valuable, actually.
And I actually find that is very true. So exactly, data in, data out. Like, you know, if the bad data goes in, you're never gonna get good results. But I actually find the future, particularly for tech, the scenario is very interesting because, for example, for marketing use cases, people will likely take the output from the models and then fix it a bit and then put it out, hopefully, so that it's not just all junk. But if you can imagine for someone who's using Copilot or something else to do development and then publishes, you know, put stuff to production and whatever, and if they don't, then open source the code that they checked, they wrote and whatnot, and no one would be asking questions in Stack Overflow anymore. If everyone's just using the text box and nothing is exposed anymore, well, nothing, there's probably something. But then, particularly for those data sets, I think the quality would drop a lot for sure. But, you know, it depends on how things will go.
Should we take the question? What do we do concretely now in using AI in development and deployment of apps aside Copilot and Visual Studio? And that would be GitHub Copilot. It looks like there's going to be other Copilots in Studio too, just to make it even more confusing. Because GitHub Copilot has access to it's one of the better names because it's actually got GitHub data in it. So it's really about using text to retrieve code or to understand code, to have it summarize code for you. I would hope there's a Copilot in Visual Studio that helps me navigate Visual Studio, that actually understands the studio well. Like, this is the joke. Visual Studio should be an ideal beginner's environment because everything you need is there. You don't have to assemble a tool stack. It's just that it's impenetrable because of its control suite. And if they simplified the UX, they anger all the existing users. So having a text box, a chat window where you can say, hey, I want to make a mobile game, and it would guide you through using Studio to get you to that point, I think it would be wildly compelling. To actually answer the question, I don't know. I mean, I've got ChatGPT open a lot. I use Home Assistant in my house, and so I have the OpenAI API attached to that so that I can use full sentences to operate my house. It's not necessarily about development, but, you know, lighting's important too. Getting a little obsessed about CO2 levels in my office. Literally I now have an alarm set. When CO2 gets above 1,000 parts per million, go for a walk. You know, better for you that way. But yeah, there are more tools. It depends on what you're doing. I live in the Microsoft realm most of the time, so the Copilot for Power Platform, watch how quickly that thing makes heterogeneous clients. That's stunning and a remarkable tool. But, you know, I would happily pass it to all of you. Are there other LLMs or current generation tools in the AI space that you're using for development?
Honestly, not much past asking it to write the unit tests.
I presume you use Code Whisperer because, you know, you work for the company.
Of course, got a couple videos on the AWS Developer YouTube channel on it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, my experience with Copilot, Code Whisperer is like they work great until they don't. So you'll be working on something and it'll give you a suggestion. You're like, holy cow, that's exactly what I was going to type. And then you're doing a little bit more, and then it gives you like a little bigger suggestion. You're like, okay, that's pretty good. And then all of a sudden it'll just go off the rails. And you're like, whoa, okay, nope. Yeah. Like, this is why we can't trust AI. So yeah, I mean, certainly doing mundane tasks like things I call hand jamming. So like you know how to do it, but you still have to type the keys into the keyboard, like for unit tests. I found it's really helpful with that. But I haven't successfully used it to create anything. So like creating new libraries, APIs, something where you're making something for the first time. Because assuming you're doing that, it doesn't already exist. And so how do you explain that?
Yeah.
And then, I'm a .NET MAUI developer, so super niche field, and we don't have a ton of training data on that, but
There's not a lot of GitHub libraries, or apps with a lot of MAUI in them yet.
yeah, so basically replace what I call hand jamming and do something where like I know exactly what I have to do, but it's going to take me at least an hour or two to type it out. Let's see if it can do it for me.
Yeah. Florin, you Copilot?
Yes, I have experienced a lot of things with GitHub Copilot in the last period. To be honest, I was excited to see that it started to give the suggestions, taking into consideration my style of coding.
Yeah.
And I was really impressed with this aspect. What can I say? I think that if I will open Visual Studio right now without having Copilot, I think that I will close it.
Yeah. Just like if you didn't have a Solution Explorer, right? Like it's just become another tool in the toolbox. Are there roles for LLMs in your work, Annie? I know you make all this stuff work for us, but
From my side, I do use mostly ChatGPT, Copilot, and then trialing out the Kubernetes GPT as well.
Right.
So those are from my side particularly. But there's so much obviously things that you can do. Microsoft is trialing the Azure and the Security Copilot.
It is early days.
Yeah, exactly. It is. But there's those things. And obviously you can then use, in addition to, deploying or helping with the writing of the software, I think one of the best use cases is also educational. So writing the docs, creating content around this, so both internally and externally from the organizations where you're working at. So that's something that I do as well.
Let's tackle this software will replace the developer question.
As I say, I think Annie just did.
Yeah.
Writing docs, summarizing pull requests,
Yep.
summarizing code.
But again, the software doesn't have agency. Somebody has to direct this. Somebody has to ask the questions. The one thing an LLM does not do is ask any questions. So there's still a skill in gathering the information necessary to build a solution. You're just writing code a little differently. You're writing it in a prompt form, which is not that different than the way we changed writing code as we had better and better libraries, as we had better UX options. The fact that you can now express an Android and iOS client simultaneously in MAUI, and also Flutter and a few others, used to be something you just couldn't do. You had to write them separately. So this is just another tool that adds to it. Is it a net gain or loss? It's a gain. We continue to build more and more sophisticated tools to be able to build more in less time. Because none of us are getting to the bottom of our to-do list. Like, there's only more work to do. There's only more software to build. Arguably, to make it more attainable, the more automation we can put around building it, the better. Because all this stuff comes back to bite you later. The more code you write, the bigger problems you have.
Yeah, and the last part of the question, will it replace developers 100%? Obviously I'm biased because I don't want it to, but I don't see that ever happening because, to Rich's point, it's still very much an art form. You still have requirements. You still have to know what customers want. You still have to know how customers use it. And there would have to be a whole different paradigm to come along that you could type into a large language model and it would decorate a website for you, and somehow you'd tell it to communicate with another app. And
You're still giving an awful lot of direction.
yeah, so you still have that interpretation and that creativity that's involved. I definitely see our skills moving in another direction. Like if you're sitting there hand typing all the code.
The job wasn't to type the code. The job was to provide the solution.
Yeah, it's very
And there's a bunch, that's the same reason I look at the low code stuff and go, like, you really need to look at this. It's less code, but it's an excellent solution.
Yeah, I was just about to exactly say the same, that, I think the replacing will happen in the similar way, if it would happen, would be like the low-code tooling, because it's, you can use them, different users can use them, it's not necessarily developers. And I think the one thing that really has struck me along the years, I heard this quote long time ago, which was, it's a bit cheesy, but I think we're talking about AI and everything, so it's allowed. So when the electric light bulb was created and invented, the people who were making candles, they needed to realize that they were in the business of creating light rather than making candles. And this goes exactly to what you were saying. Mm-hmm. So probably the work will change, and that's okay. That's been the case for every profession ever.
Well, and ours too. The way I write code today is very different than the way I wrote it in the early 2000s, different again in the 90s, because the requirements changed as well, and the expectations of what software could do had changed. The thing that's interesting for me right now is that we're in a real lull in the innovation of the client. The phone and the tablet and the PC have been the same for more than a decade, almost 20 years. And that's weird. Normally they change more often than that. Like, we're kind of waiting to be disrupted, waiting for augmented reality to take in, waiting for one of these ambient computes to take up. We dabbled in speech with the devices from Amazon and Google, and they've kind of hit the wall. They had their own set of problems, but nothing's taken a hold past the screen with either touch or mouse.
Yeah, I was just saying, I saw the question about is it Humane, the name of the company that's making that pen?
Yeah, the one that Marquez did slam so effectively.
Just roasted it in his review. But I think the long and short of that review is, like, it's not there yet.
Yeah.
But it could be.
Yeah, and it's good that they're experimenting.
Yeah.
And somebody's got to take the hits to try new form factors, whatever those look like. I'm sorry, Florian, I think we stepped on you twice there.
I just wanted to add something. Probably someone is going to hate me after I will say this, but it is what it is. In my opinion, I'm on the same page with you on all the aspects you highlighted. I think that the AI is not going to replace the developers, but I'm not sure about the testers.
I think automated testing automated test generation will only go so far. That I would argue, take all the easy tests out. Like, okay, write my unit tests, because you should be spending time on integration tests. And even then, then go take a good, guarantee you're still going to get errors that occur because you didn't have the right unit test. Like, they're still going to show up. But yeah, there's a certain amount of rote testing that nobody wants to write that can be generated. And I don't even think the LLM does a particularly unique job of that. I looked at tools before that were able to generate a lot of those fundamental tests. But there's deeper thinking about actually making software reliable that you need to think about and build solutions for. So I think testers will get better. There's still a bunch of travel agents out there, but they're really good. We got a few minutes left, yeah. What software tasks are going to be automated using these AI technologies? I mean, they're already happening. We certainly talked about testing.
Pipeline generation, really anything involving YAML, I hope. Automated.
Cross-language stuff is interesting. What does this C# code look like in Rust? That, I think, because if you talk about the strength of an LLM, the tokenization strategy, the way that it manages language, makes it remarkably capable of translating between languages, including in code.
I would love that. That's actually one of the first things I worked on when I joined AWS was getting more C# examples into their docs.
Right.
I started trying to build my first serverless Lambda, and all the examples were JavaScript and Python. I'm like, that's great, but I've never used JavaScript and Python.
Right.
Like, this might as well be in French. I don't know what this does. So yeah, to be able to translate it, or like we were saying earlier, writing docs and have the docs automatically generated and translated.
But you're going to slam into idiomatic issues, like trying to do direct conversion of even C# into, say, F#, right? To jump between an object-oriented mindset over to a functional mindset. It'll run in F#, but an F-sharp person will be sad because functional thinking is very different.
Yeah.
And to re-architect a given solution into a functional style means a lot more work than just converting the code. All right. We jumped against that. Who's going to win the race? I think we are. Tech gets better when the giants all bang around at each other, right? There's a reason to keep getting better. It's very unusual for Microsoft to choose to have led. They only got lucky, let's be clear. They happened to make an investment in OpenAI early on when it wasn't much of anything and got them all moved to Azure, and that's luck. But they also then chose to act on it. You made this point about Meta. The race now is who's got the best data sets, who's got the compute availability, and how are they going to be able to react effectively to the evolution as it happens. I would argue that Microsoft's biggest weakness now is they want to consume cloud, and there's plenty of evidence, there's plenty of case to be made for putting NPUs into endpoints and doing more of this work directly on the local device, and that doesn't sell more cloud. So are they're going to have innovator's dilemma already? They're going to push back on that. Google's got some very bright people, but making new products seems to be hard for them. Their cloud's not as pervasive. They do very well in the Valley, but they don't do further than that. Amazon's got arguably the largest cloud. The question is how seriously they take the DevRel side of facilitating developers to use their tools on that. And that's a challenge there too.
And I'd like to throw in, because I kind of have a different take on who wins the race, because right now the race is all around generic large language models. So, the model that can do everything, answer any question, whereas I see a huge opportunity for somebody to come in and create a real specialized model. Whether maybe it's like you're a car mechanic and this is going to
that
be
seems
trained
to be
on.
the push now, right? We had the same problem in data analytics back in the day. You built the mother of all data cubes, and it was usually the first example you had, and it was slow, it was expensive, and the results weren't that good, but it taught you enough to turn around and make a much smaller cube that was focused on a problem space and did a better job all around. I already see Microsoft talking about small language models, and that to me is when a mature technology is starting to mature, when the answer is not just make it bigger, but rather cut the unnecessary edges off of it, thin it out.
There's really cool AI-powered applications in the video editing space, for example. So there are tools that can cut from an hour-long recorded podcast, for example, cut out all the make sure that the right speaker is being visible if it's video, and so forth, and make short-form content from the long-form content, which is exactly this scenario. It's a very specific task, and it's quite honestly automated to very high extent. You don't have to give any descriptions. It does it for you. There's a few presets that you can do and so forth. So I find those kind of tooling actually to be the most helpful for a person who doesn't want to dive deeper into understanding why does the technology work or doesn't. It just works. It's like magic to them. That's it.
Yeah. And again, just becomes part of the plumbing. The fact that there happens to be a machine learning model in there is almost irrelevant. It's when I say find me clips, it finds good clips. And make this audio not suck, the audio doesn't suck.
That's been one of my favorite tools.
The no suck audio?
Yeah, you just, doesn't matter. I was recording a video the other day, and the lawn guy's got a leaf blower going outside, and my first reaction was I
got to stop.
Ruined it. But I was like, I'm just going to keep going. And there's a website called Auphonic that I've been using. And you literally can upload a video, upload an audio file, and it'll isolate the speech. It'll normalize all the levels. So if you're doing an interview and somebody's mic's all the way down here and the other person's mic's it'll balance it all out. And so you don't really have to care as much anymore. You don't have to put in all that prep and have soundproof walls, because you just upload it to Auphonic, or at least that's what I do, and then out comes this. It sounds like NPR. It's so good.
Nice. Should students be using generative AI as a tool? I think they should use all the tools.
Yes.
I'm on the same page with you here. I experienced something with my students at the university, And they are very happy because this tool for them, by the way, the license is free for them. This tool for them is like a mentor. They are addressing questions, they got answers, and so on and so forth. So it's good also for the entry level, because when I ran the proof of concept within Centric, I was able to see that the juniors are not asking their mentors very much, because they had the GitHub Copilot and they asked Copilot for...
It's answering more of the questions.
Exactly.
Before they have to go to the mentor. And hopefully they go to the mentor for more difficult questions.
Yeah.
Stuff that the tool's going to have a tougher time dealing with. And again, I think the only problem we have with it is its name. We add new tools all the time. You know, all of a sudden Studio speaks cloud really well, and it's part of what you should learn as a developer now is deployment into the cloud and using pipelines through GitHub or whatever tool suite you want to use in that space. That used to be extremely difficult. Well, first it was not a thing, then it was extremely difficult. Now it's a wizard. It's just expected to be used. And of course you should use those tools. I just don't know that these tools are that dramatically unique than compared to other tools, except for the science fiction effects.
Yeah, and I think personally I'd be more weary of professors that didn't allow their students to use it or banned it, because it's the world we live in now.
Yeah.
And I think the whole point of university is to get you ready to find a job, be a productive member of society. And I've had too many professors in the past that wouldn't let us use something like, I remember like handwriting code on my tests, because if you use IntelliSense, that was cheating.
Yeah.
It's like, well, every job I'm going to be at, I'm going to have Visual Studio. So what's the point of this?
And then actually you should get skilled with IntelliSense, because it's not trivial to use well. And you know, you speak to another overarching issue, which is one of these generational gaps where I think it's a challenge for teachers to not insist that their students learn the same things that they learned, but rather learn the easiest path to the outcome that was actually intended, building an effective solution. Don't make the scars of your old battles have to be worn by somebody who never had to have that battle. Should we approach the AGI topic? Are we anywhere close to having AI with cognition and real thoughts? The experts say no. The Jeff Hintons and the Suskavars and the Yan Kuhns say, nope, not even vaguely close. In fact, Hinton made the point very clearly that the generative AI algorithm does not have a path to that. We need to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I kind of see it as, you know, we've always held the Turing test as like, this is when we'll have human equivalent AI.
What we've really done is shown the Turing test sucks.
Right, so the way I see it is, like we've been saying numerous times today, it'll feel like magic. It'll certainly feel like you're talking with a real person, but at the end of the day, it doesn't know what it's doing. It is just, like you said, using tokenization, and it's not necessarily generating new thoughts. It's pulling together the body of work that humanity has already created.
Iterative work.
Yeah.
Again, it's a product of science fiction, which includes a misinterpretation of Moore's law to create a superintelligence that it will only ever get better. It will improve exponentially. Now, Moore's law is not a law, right? It's actually an observation of when an industry works incredibly hard, they can maintain a certain cadence of improvement, which they are now failing at because they're kind of hitting the limits of physics on all of this. And the bigger thing for me when I look for exponential opportunities in the large language model is like, there's not another exponentially large data set to be had. We have indexed a lot of the internet already, right? Where's GPT-5? Where's the data set? We just don't have more data. Can we, and in fact, we're not doing that. We're not going bigger, we're going smaller. We're getting better at tuning. We're focusing in on the narrower scope of things. So it's a good place to be. Like, it speaks to a technology that's going to persist, that it's already, in this fairly short amount of time, we have not slammed into the bottom of the trough of disillusionment before we started to right-size stuff and start being more thoughtful about how we used it. That, I think we might even be learning, like, to get better at building product. We're down to the last couple of minutes. Any final thoughts? Something bothering you, Annie? What do you think?
Nothing bothering me. I think we've had a lovely discussion, and I think as a summary, I would like to kind of say that because there's, anytime I speak about AI or ML topics, it's usually I try to encourage everyone to try them and so forth, but it's still every time someone does, like, as you saw here, kind of comes in like, oh, should I be using them? And I'm like, yes, you should be at least trying to see if they work for your use case, if they work for your workflow. If they don't, I've met a couple of developers who don't like it. It feels like they are bothered by it. Then that's totally fine. You can make your workflow and you can make your work exactly as you want it to be. But I would recommend you to give it a shot and seeing it if it helps you, and if it doesn't, it's okay.
Yeah, it's still early days. We're seeing some performance gains, but it's not universal. If it becomes universal, then yeah, you're probably going to need to use them. Florian?
As a final thought, I think that in order to become a better developer tomorrow, in my opinion, we will need to invest more in being able to create effective prompts. Mm-hmm. So we will need to learn how to ask artificial intelligence to do a better job for us.
Mm-hmm. Fair?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic on all of this. I think of people born in the early 1900s, before the automobile exists, before airplanes exist, and then they saw humans walk on the moon. Mm-hmm. And they did all of that without AI, or we did all of that without AI, humans did. And I'm incredibly excited to see what we're going to accomplish in my lifetime. But I will say, something we all have a responsibility for in this room is, talk to your mom about it, because now you can create videos that, from a picture of me, that will make me say things and use my voice. There's already scam calls out there, people abusing this technology, and as long as we have that one layer of we can't trust everything anymore.
Yeah.
Let me call.
Certainly society's going to have to learn to live with this to some degree.
Yeah, and so we are entering this world where, you already can't believe everything you read on the internet, but now you definitely can't believe everything you read on the internet. But yeah, my concern is, the folks who aren't in this room, who aren't up to date and don't know about all these advancements, being taken advantage of. Yeah. And so keep that in mind when you're talking with family, talking with friends who might not be up to date on this, and just say, hey, just so you know, this stuff can happen. This stuff's out there.
It's got to be sufficiently powerful to be bad, to be useful. I don't think we get away from that. You can do evil things with a car, too, but we're not banning cars. So certainly we're going to see problems with this software, and are seeing them, and hopefully we'll get better at resisting that. That's all the time we've got. I hope this was useful for you. Thank you so much for staying, and I hope you had a great day. And please give us your feedback. It's how we make the show better. We'll see you back here again next year.